by now, I think you all have already received some word of your projects and where you're headed to. And so I'm hoping that with this particular session, when we go through, when I'm going through this information on how to approach the consulting projects, so you can sort of begin to think about your specific project. And I'd like to leave a little bit of time at the end for any questions that you have, especially, and it can be related specifically to your project, that's fine, because often those questions actually relate to everybody else's projects, so I'm happy to field those questions. Okay, so just very briefly, I know many of you from having just finished up with you guys in corporate strategy, but just for those of you who don't, I've run the global residencies, a global business experience for about 10 years now in China and Argentina, Brazil, and now Peru. And prior to coming to Georgetown, I was a management consultant, and I think that that's why they've asked me to put together some materials about how to approach consulting projects. It was either that or I was not in the room once when we were having an important meeting and I was volunteered to do this. But it is something that it's near to my heart. It's stuff that I've actually implemented. So I'm hoping that you get a lot out of this. All right, so this is us. This is where we're going: Abu Dhabi, Johannesburg, Barcelona, Lima, Shanghai. Obviously, and this is true for our consulting projects as well as consulting projects that the McKinseys and the BCGs of the world are looking at. Clients come to us for some very specific reasons, but a range of reasons. One of the things that I like about sort of trying to encapsulate this is that it really is a relatively contained universe of reasons why companies are looking for help, right? So if you look along client issues here, sometimes it's a need for top-line growth strategy. Sometimes it's a cost kind of strategy, operational processes, making an investment decision, so sort of go, no-go kind of decisions, and long-term strategic roadmaps. And I think that with the portfolio of projects that we're looking at among all the globals, that we have some of all of these there. Just a quick request, could you all put away your laptops, because there's no real reason for you to have them out. I mean, this stuff will get posted. Is that okay? I can't imagine what else you're doing. Well, I could imagine, don't want to talk about it. So, need for top-line growth strategy. So this is the case type, let's say marketing and sales customer strategy. And within that, then, there's a particular canon of work. This isn't rocket science. You're not making up stuff. You're not reinventing the wheel. There are certain types of analyses that you're going to be looking at, right, if this is the kind of project that you have. If your project is about this, a need for top-line growth, and a lot of these projects are. I mean, I know in the case of Lima, there are a couple of those. We have some no-go decisions, but then there are also ones that where companies just want to grow within the Peruvian market. Look at Dell, for example. So what are the analyses you're going to be looking at? Well, obviously, it's going to be market sizing, market share, customer analysis, consumer segmentation, consumer research, the price that people are going to pay, the channel that they're going to go to, what share of wallet you're getting, consumer buying process, the elasticity, sort of the elasticity of demand, things like that. So you're familiar with that, right? I mean, these are the analyses you're going to be looking at. This is important when I go forward with this because you're going to want to front load all of your decision making, right, about what you're going to do. You want to be very, very specific about the type of project you have and the kind of analyses you're going to want to do. Likewise, if you're looking at a cost analysis, I know in Lima, I don't have any of these projects, but even if it is a top-line growth strategy, sometimes you're going to be looking at costs, right? Because let's say that demand is very elastic and you're not very competitive, you're going to be looking at margins, and there could be a cost issue, right? So you may be looking at trying to reduce costs to be more competitive, and that comes up with a different series of analyses. Whoops. Cost drivers, scale curves, experience curves, supply curves, cost benchmarking. These, by the way, are almost impossible in developing countries to get information like this. You are usually flying blind or making up your own databases. Not making up your own data, making up your own databases. Operational processes that need to be reevaluated. So I've had a bunch of these projects in Argentina and in Brazil, where it's a matter of trying to figure out the most cost-effective way of distributing product, or of getting agricultural product from the north of the country to the south, or the south to the north. And again, these tend to be cost-competitive kind of industries, and you're trying to figure out what's the best what's the best way of what are the best operational processes to put in place, right? And again, these are all very obvious analyses you're going to be looking at. Competitive benchmarking, what's sort of the best practices, process mapping, cost-benefit analyses. Go, no-go decisions. I have a couple of those in Lima. So again, it's sort of what's the competition look like? Is it going to be? Are you price competitive? Are you cost competitive? What's the willingness to switch, et cetera? Those analyses should be are very tried and true, very conventional. And nobody, I'm pretty sure no one has one of these, but sort of long-term strategies. This would be corporate strategy. Items such as your share price analysis, valuation, industry analysis, white space opportunity, and so on, sort of like what do I want to be when I grow up? And I don't know if there are any of those projects in this particular portfolio. That would be a hard one to do in 8 weeks, right? Okay, so this is sort of the universe of reasons why clients typically are looking for help. And I think that's very well represented in the projects that we have here with Global. Here's an important point, though. I'm going to show you mostly the way McKinsey approaches consulting projects. But there are as many approaches to consulting projects as there are consulting projects, as there are faculty members, as there are consulting firms, as there are clients, right? So you have to be a little bit flexible in terms of what you feel you want to adopt, right? I'm going to show you something that I think is important that can really help you out. But ultimately, there are a lot of different approaches to doing this. Also to remember, we're not a consulting firm. One of the things that's a problem, I wish we were a consulting firm, we'd get paid. But no, we don't get paid, and we're not a consulting firm, and you're getting a grade for this, and your clients are tens of thousands of miles away. It's a very difficult hybrid, right? So I can show you a McKinsey approach to consulting. I can show you a BCG approach to consulting, but we don't have 6 months to do this, and we're not getting paid $6 million, and we're not anywhere near our clients. The last thing is that not all projects are appropriate for this. So this is very much a problem-solving, this is an approach to problem-solving kind of projects, consulting projects. But sometimes we get ones, for example, in Brazil last year, there was one about what do capital flows look like among countries within South America? Is there even a possibility that Brazil could be sort of a center of capital flows? So there's not a problem to be solved there. It's sort of a question, right, of what the landscape looks like, what the possibilities are, and so on. And so you'll readily see when I show you this particular approach that probably wouldn't have been as appropriate. Does that make sense? Does anybody have well, we'll get to that when we go through some of the steps as to which of your projects maybe don't fit into this particular rubric. Okay, but more importantly, your faculty trumps, right? So I don't want to get into trouble here. And like whatever I'm telling you, if your faculty member doesn't feel it's appropriate for your project, you can't cite me, okay? Because then I'll get emails and phone calls. But they do have an identifiable anatomy, no matter how much time you have. You guys have realistically 8 weeks, I guess, or I mean more time, thank goodness, because we're starting in November instead of starting January 1. But realistically, you've got other things going on now. There's a Christmas break and so on. You don't have very much time, but it still follows the same sequence, right? The first part is getting smart, and that's what we really want you to be doing sort of upfront now in November and December, is getting smart about the industry, getting smart about the facts of the company, getting smart about sort of the universe that you're going to be dealing in, right? So that is already done. You already know whatever there is to know about financial institutions in the Shanghai market or about mid-market lending in the Lima market. Okay, so this sort of slides we'll need. I'll get back to that about constantly creating slides. I'm very big on constantly creating slides, but you just sort of want to have a, your initial springboard, your initial, I know what I'm talking about sort of phase. Work planning, this is the part that we're going to spend some time on here, which is how are you going to approach the work? Is it a logic tree? Is it, you want it to be hypothesis driven? You want to have like timing, analytics that are going to be done. None of this, of course, will follow the plan, but you at least want to have a plan, right, that you can change later. And then actually doing the work, so all the data gathering, problem and structuring analysis, the synthesis, all the so what's, right, constantly pulling up, constantly getting the so what's of the work that you're doing, and recommendations. The presentation building, and those of you who have had me for corporate strategy know that the storyline really has to be jump-started early, right? You want to have that storyline. You don't want to wait till the week before we're leaving, or the week before you're going to present to the faculty your 99% final presentation to figure out what the story is, right? You want that story up front, but you have to have that storyline, and we'll go over sort of the ways of approaching that. Your supporting slides. The teaching parts of this, which is particularly important here, which is stuff that you want to include maybe at the back that are meant to be sort of teaching moments for the client, but that's not part of the presentation, right? That's sort of the back part. Okay, so one of the things that you really should be doing here is working backwards. So chances are very good that you're not going to be able to do everything that you would want to do, or everything actually that would be required of you if we were being paid $6 million to do this project, right? So you have to work backwards in terms of containing yourself in terms of what is possible. It's got to be great. We're not going to let you go out of here with a presentation or some work that's not great. But really, know when you have to start shutting things down, right? When doors have to start closing as opposed to when doors have to continually be opening. It's better for your team, right, if you all agree with that, right, that at a particular date, okay, so February 26th, you're going to be, presenting to Professor Sesnick, all right? So if that's the date, February 27th or February 26th, then you want to make sure that everything is, is buttoned up by February 19th, so you have time to work on the presentation, which means et cetera, back and back and back, so that you are, you're constantly targeting those dates, right? It's not open-ended. And this is a particularly important point, I'll say it probably a million times today, that it isn't open-ended. You have to really stick to that because time is a lot shorter than you think it is. Okay. One of the most important things here, if you remember nothing but this particular slide, is that experienced consultants, managers everywhere will agree on a couple of very important principles, right? A lot of research without a guiding hypothesis as to what the solution is very difficult and it's very inefficient, okay? So not having at least a prototypical answer, like some hypothesis as to what the answer is, means that your research is just amorphous, right? It is without direction. And trust me, there are probably more economist articles and more IMF reports and more IADB reports and more Asian Development Bank reports on what you're studying than you could possibly digest, right? So you really want to make sure that you're doing research towards a particular point. The hypotheses drive all the analyses. So once you have your hypothesis, what you think you know what the answer is, and that should be very, very early, then you figure out what the analyses are to support that hypothesis going forward. Very important, writing your presentation from the very, very beginning is an excellent, excellent tool. It's an excellent tool for organizing, for planning, for figuring out what it is that you know and what you don't know. So having a deck, having a fat deck at every meeting, having a fat deck at every meeting for yourselves, just constantly being able to work through, just start thinking horizontally, right? Headers and data, headers and data, headers and data. It's an excellent organizational tool. And it's very, very difficult to get away from throwing, if you're just throwing stuff in, everybody's going to know that you are all just throwing stuff in. It's got to be a point, right? If it's not making a point and there's no data, then why are we doing this, right? So it's a very, very good discipline to be working through. Has anybody here already worked in consulting, just out of curiosity? Summers, regular, you in the back? Blonde, I can't, that's all I can see is. Okay, so does any of this, did you all, would you start with a deck or start with a presentation or at least work on the presentation constantly? Every day, right, good. Right, exactly. So your deck will become your best friend. It will become your only friend, right? So you just have to constantly, every day, right? You're with the deck, and it's a great way for everybody to come together, right? If you have 5 or 6 people on your team, everybody's doing different stuff. The deck is where it all comes together. Okay, so this should be the process. You get the big picture of the industry, and we'll go through this. You state the client's issue as a yes or no question. This is very important, okay, because the way that the descriptions have been given to you, you've been given some deliverables, but it's really powerful if you can synthesize it into a yes or a no answer, right? A yes/no question, or at the very least, a how question. And I'll go through some examples of that. Determine the analyses that you need to answer the question, right? So yes, no. And then you determine the analyses you need to prove that you're right or to prove that you're wrong. I mean, you often will end up proving yourself wrong, and you have to change the hypothesis. Execute the analyses and provide the recommendations. Okay, so let's go through some of this. Start with the industry very, very broadly. So this is what you should be doing right now. This is a great time for a little light reading, when you're not doing anything else, to start looking at your industry, right? Vegetable oil in Peru, I don't know. I mean, but you need to find out, right, what that looks like, how big oil is in the industry, just the size, right? Is it a crazy industry? Are there a lot of competitors? Is it really tumultuous? Is it more like, like steel that changes at sort of a glacier pace? Is it more like, IT, where it's just, happening so fast and the costs are all marginal costs? There are no sunk costs. Like, what does it look like? What does this industry feel like, right? That's what you want to know, and you want to have a conversation around that. Like, what kind of an industry are you dealing with? And you might come up with, for example, that this particular industry is really highly fragmented. It has very low fixed costs. It has super high growth. People are coming in and coming out all the time. It's almost hyper competitive, and it's really, really unprofitable. That's what you want to get at. I mean, just sort of a feel for what kind of an industry it is. So at least in Peru, we're dealing with IT, with commodities, with banking, with microbanking. So again, you can find a couple of articles that are going to give you a good feel as to what that competition looks like, what the industry is like, how fast it's growing, and so on. Okay, that's the first step. Just get smart about that. And if you're reading about anything, make a slide. State the problem as a yes/no question. So this provides a lot of focus. It allows a lot of structure. Don't be afraid to do this. It doesn't matter. I mean, I was going to say it doesn't matter if you're wrong. Of course it matters if you're wrong, but only at the beginning, it's fine. What you want is to have an opinion as to what the answer is, right? You guys are smart. This is your second year of business school, and you've already had like 10 years of business. I mean, just figure out what the answer is, or just have an idea of what the answer is, okay? Can I successfully market my stuff in the United States if all I want is 0.1% of the marketplace and I have a highly competitive product? Yes, right? I mean, you would think yes. So you say yes, okay? So can XYZ profitably penetrate the US market such that it gets 30% of its sales from that market, okay? So then you look at what their sales actually are. If it's a small portion of the United States, you look at their product and you say, yeah, I think so. But you might also ask, how can XYZ profitably enter that's a little more amorphous, right? I kind of prefer the yes/nos, but the how part will work also, right? So you still have to come up with a hypothesis as to how. So yes/no, the hypothesis is a little bit easier, but the how part, you're going to get to the same place anyway. Okay, so here, one of the last things that on this slide that's very important, I'll come back to this, is what does profitability mean to your client? And in general, I bet you will find on all the project descriptions, even with the deliverables, that very few of them have a quantitative goal, right? And you really need that. That's one of the things that you're going to want from the very, very beginning is what is defining success for you people. So if you say, how can I grow my IT products in the mid-market in Abu Dhabi, then you have to, or can I grow my, can I successfully grow my products in the mid-market in Abu Dhabi? The question is, well, what does that mean to you? I mean, do you want to increase your sales 5% every year? You want to increase your sales 10%? Are you looking at a market share target? But get that target, because you can't do your pro formas if you don't have the target, if you don't know what the profitability target is or what the share target is. But get the target, right? Otherwise, again, it's too amorphous, and you're going to drown in information without actually having a particular point to it. So I'll come back to that. But I know with my teams, it's the very first thing I'm going to ask you is to make sure that you've got that with your clients, right? That's got to be done like within the first week of your project. Okay, and then you answer the question, give it your best shot, using what you know from your business education, from high-level review. Think through what the answers might be. Yes or no. I mean, you've already looked at the industry, you know a little bit about the competition. This is from a very high level, right? Can you legitimately and feel pretty comfortable or pretty uncomfortable, doesn't really matter, agree with your team that the answer is yes or no? Or come up with a how, okay? And I'll go through an example of the how chart. So let's say the answer is yes. Okay, so if the answer is yes, not a rhetorical question, a question so that I can stop speaking for a moment. What analyses would you have to do to prove yourself right if you think that this is the answer, right? So yes, my company can profitably increase sales in the US to 30% of its total sales. Because, like, what would you have to be able to say in order to make that statement, in order to prove that that's true? Greg? Sorry, I remembered your name. Yeah. I'm so excited that I remembered your name.
You'd need to analyze the market to see if you could actually sell that amount. That if you multiply it by your price, it would equate to the amount of revenue that you're actually looking to produce.
Okay, right. So the first thing, I mean, it's obviously to size this 30%. So what does that mean, right? And what percentage of the market is that? And you can just sort of look at it and go, there's no way these people are going to get 50% of the market, right? Or, yeah, it seems pretty plausible, right? So that's one thing, is sort of just getting, is sizing the objective. Okay, so now you know more or less that it's small. But, it's okay, so Valeria will remember this. We had a project in Argentina, a small designer bathing suit company that wanted to sell bathing suits into Miami. Okay, so probably a lot of competition is what I'm thinking, right? But also some place where people buy a lot of bathing suits, so there is that, right? So what are some of the things that we would want to know? Let's say your answer is, yeah, I think they can, because they don't want very much, right? And they've got really cool bathing suits. They don't look anything like American bathing suits, right? So what else would you need to know? What other analyses? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, so this is a very good point. Just in terms of the execution part of it, right? Are the logistics in place? Is it even possible? In the case of Argentina, half the time you can't export anything because you have to, or you can't import anything because you have to export the same amount. So, I mean, there are all sorts of things that would get in the way of that, right? So that's an issue. Yeah.
I would like to know if we were talking about like high-end, expensive bathing suits or cheap bathing suits, and where do people buy them?
Right. Right, okay, great. So a couple of things in what you just said. There's a whole distribution aspect. Where are you going to sell these? Are the distribution channels actually there? Is it high end? Is it low end? And then also, is there any white space, right? So you're going to have to do some competitor analysis, some channel analysis. There's a lot of analysis that pops up. And remember the first slide I showed you, you would know, right? You have a smorgasbord of analyses you can look at. But if the answer is true, I mean, in order to make your hypothesis correct, you might say to yourself, okay, overall, I have to know that industry demand is high enough to absorb this. I have to know that the distribution channels are there, right, that they're attractive. I have to know that my product is differentiated, that it's, it's competitive. And I have to know that I have the resources available. And those resources, back to your point about the logistics, that you've got all of that in place. So as a result, among other these are analyses you're going to have to do. You'd need a complete competitor analysis, a client price performance analysis, a distribution channel analysis, a determination of the costs and necessary resources to increasing market share. So you would have those in place, right? This is what I have to know. I have to be sure of this in order to make my dream come true, in order to make that yes come true. Okay, so it's just a simple way of tackling a problem and of breaking it down, right? These are analyses that I would have to do. Chances are you'll find out that there are a couple of analyses that you should do that you forgot about, and that's okay, right? Because those will shake out. Or you'll find out that, in fact, this is not true. Your product is not highly differentiated, and it is not price competitive, and then you go back to, it doesn't mean that the research is lost. It just means that you now get to play around with your hypothesis and say maybe, right, or I don't think so. Does that make sense to you? But again, having that target, I think maybe this sounds too simplistic, but it makes a huge difference to have that endpoint. You can change the endpoint every once in a while, but having it means that all of you on the team will remain friends. Okay, so here's an illustrative hypothesis-driven tree for a how question, right? So how can company B grow its business effectively, right? So we say, okay, well, in order for it to grow, for an IT company, or let's say, a banking company in any one of these countries, right? In order to grow its business effectively, I'm thinking, well, it could increase market share by changing its product portfolio, or by changing some part of its product performance. Or maybe it can reach that target by introducing its distribution reach, right? Those are two things you've kind of recognized from your industry analysis, that it's really sort of a function of price performance, and it's also a function of distribution. So that's how it can. How can it do this profitably? Well, it can increase efficiency and effectiveness, or maybe this isn't a problem. Maybe your company is super profitable, so you don't have to deal with that part, right? Or maybe they already have this going on in spades, and it's this part that's the problem, right? The effective part has to do with the profitability. So you would have to sort of think a little bit in advance, more to the strategy, right, before you get to the analyses, as to what you might be able to do. And from that, you would have a series of possibilities that grow out of this, out of increasing market share by changing the product portfolio. And then these would end up also with sort of final, more finite possibilities that you would then test. I think that this is, if you have a highly defined project where you can already be seeing some of the outcomes, this would be a great way to go, because you're really getting to the answers super fast. If it's a little more amorphous, as some of these tend to be, then maybe the yes, no, or the how part, or the yes, no question might be the better way to go. But you guys can figure that out, right? You'll probably have a much better feel for how this is going to work. And be thinking about this now, because I'll just cold call some people about what their projects are, and we can walk through this. That requires you remembering what your project is. Okay, so if you don't know, you might want to, maybe that's why you all have your laptops out, is to find out what you're on. Okay, so the ensuing analyses are your roadmap. Okay, so now you have your marching orders, right? You've got the analyses you have to do. Then you can figure out who's going to do them. You collect data around those. Okay, so you're not just out there collecting a whole bunch of data. If you're doing that, you're definitely doing the wrong thing. And you'll know it, because you can't make any slides out of it, right? You want to be able, every time you read something, you want to make sure that it's going into the deck, right? That it has a place in this particular analysis, this particular hypothesis. I think my product is a highly differentiated product, right? And that's the research you're doing. You're looking at bathing suits by every single maker in the United States. Foreign imports, you're looking just at the high end, everybody, where it's coming from, the price points. That's the research you're doing, right? And it's going in as a page in that particular section to prove or disprove that the product is highly differentiated. If you're just reading about bathing suits, which is fun, but if you're just reading about bathing suits, then this is not constructive. And again, I'll mention you don't have very much time. Okay, so rethinking, if you're wrong, leads to further analyses. Make sure the analyses are helping you to build a story, right? They're part of the story that you've already concocted. And I don't know if I've said this yet, but make a chart every day. Make a slide for every find, every aha, every new piece of detail. Every single thing that you read should have a header and should have some data in the body. And if it doesn't actually contribute to where you're supposed to be going, make the slide anyway, put it in the appendix. So it's there, it's in your back pocket in case you ever have to drag it out again. Okay, does that make sense? I know it makes sense, but I have a feeling that most of you won't do this. And you will thank me if you do. If just every time, like you're reading an economist, make 5 slides from the, from the article you just read. Yes, Jorge.
So in terms of communication with the clients, defining the problem always helps to narrow the scope of the project. Would you recommend to share our hypotheses with our clients or not?
Or not. Okay, so if I can, remind me if I don't come back to that, because that's a really important question, and I think I address it later when we get to this is how you contact your client, this is what you should do, this is what you should share, these are some of the do's and don'ts. Actually, I'll answer that now, though, because I think that, you all, on the one hand, you run the risk, right, of opening up Pandora's box, right, that you share with them the hypothesis and they go berserk. What? It's not possible. Of course it's possible. We've invested all this money, da, da, da. And so you end up maybe skewing, your own view by sharing. On the other hand, you don't want to surprise your client or embarrass your client at the end by coming up, with some sort of analysis and some sort of an answer that's sort of anathema to the company. So I think maybe very, very early, getting a lot of that out on the table, sort of what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, like what is totally off the table, right? Like you cannot come in here and tell us that we're not going to be a commodities firm anymore. That's off the table, okay? Stuff like that. And also get a feel for whose project this is. Is this actually being done to promote somebody throughout the organization? Get a feel for that, right? But I think that at some point, you stop communicating that, you make the project your own, and you go with it. If we had 6 months and you were being paid millions of dollars, there'd be a lot more iteration, I think. But I think here, this is where the hybrid comes into play a little bit more, which is that I've got 8 weeks. This is what we talked about in terms of scope, and this is where I'm going, And maybe if they ask to share, if they're asking you, then I think you have to. Otherwise, I think you have to be a little more discreet. Make sense? Okay. So a few summarizing points in terms of structuring the analytics here. So you want to get the issue out on the table, right? So we think we've given you the issue, but you want to make sure that you've understood it correctly, that you and the client have looked in each other's eyes meaningfully, or at least listened to each other's voices, meaningfully, and said, okay, this really is what we're doing. This is the issue. The issue is, can we? Should we? Are we? Stated as a yes/no question, that's your issue. You want your hypothesis. You want your analytics. You want to figure out who's going to do it, like where that information is going to come from and who has the responsibility. Easy, right? And if you follow that, once you start, I think once you start straying from that, I think you will find that, that you end up being a lot less productive. So the issue analysis should include the hypothesis for how the issue is going to be resolved, the analyses, the sources, the responsibilities, and the end products of the analyses. So not just, okay, you do an industry structure analysis, right? It's got to be you do an industry structure analysis to tell me if this is a hyper-competitive industry. Like there's got to be a point, right? There's got to be an answer to this particular analysis. Okay, so a few summarizing points again from the outset. Make sure you understand the problem, and then you can state it very simply. This is sort of redux, right? You're trying to take something that's big and amorphous and make it something very, very concrete, very, very real that you can address immediately, right? That you know how you're going to address. The basics are going to take you a long way. Everything you've learned so far, right? The structure of the industry, the nature of the industry, competitor mapping, best practices, operations analysis, value chain analysis, all the stuff that you've already been doing, right? That's the stuff that will take you like 75% of the way to your answer, more than likely. Don't try to analyze everything. Be selective. Be direct. Right? Being busy doesn't mean that you're being effective. It just means that you're busy. Right? You want to be busy on something that has a particular point where you can come in, you drag it into the cave where the meeting is with your team, and you say, look, this is the answer. Right? You don't want to come in with just all sorts of data. Right? You want to have points. Like, we're finished with this. We're done. This is the answer. Right? Make a chart every day. Make many charts every day. Like, every day, just that's all you're doing, right? And then when you have a whole bunch of charts, combine them into 3 charts and then put those away. They're done. They're going to be in the presentation. Know your story so you can explain it in 30 seconds. This is called the elevator test, right? This is McKinsey. Actually, all of this has been McKinsey. So the elevator test is when you're on an elevator with the principal of the firm. They say, so, what are you working on? You know, you can actually say in 30 seconds, we are working on a market entry plan for this particular company because they would like to have we think that they can get 30% of the market because they have a highly competitive product and it's empty space. First floor, right? So that's what you want to be able to do. And that's what you want to be able to do if I ask you what this is about, or any of the faculty. So what's this about? That you can say that, right? Make it your own. Okay, so what time is it? Have I already run over? 1:10? How long does this go for? 1:50? Okay, good. Okay, so global faculty observations and directives. And I'll go through each one of these. So this is more going to Jorge's question about like how, you know, once you know that this is how you're approaching your particular project, then really how are you going to, you know, put this all together? How do the meetings go? How does data collection go? What do I tell my client? How, you know, at what point do I stop talking to my client, and so on. So before you start, I know this is odd, we'll talk about project data, project meetings, your clients, and the presentation. Okay, so before you start work, again, you really want to spend some time defining and thinking. Okay, so you all have your project descriptions, the 2-page project descriptions, which are meant to be pretty tight and pretty Spartan. I mean, they can't be much more than that, right? Because you don't want to be so constrained that you ruin any sort of pastures for, for investigation. But you also want to have, what at least we think the project is about, right? At least when we went and talked to the clients, what we and the client sort of decided that the project was about. So these descriptions, by the way, get written by the clients and are sometimes written by us when the client can't quite figure out how to write it. Sometimes the client writes it, and then we have a look at it and say, this is absolutely not possible. Our students are brilliant, but there's no way we're going to get all this done, in 8 weeks. So it's a little bit iterative. But I want you to know that we have given some thought as to the scope, right? And we do ask for deliverables. So the client thinks that that's what you're going to deliver. So unless you think otherwise, you wouldn't ask them what it is that they want. Right? So that's an important part of this. When you're already looking at this, determining the issue and the scope of the project, we feel that it's already been done. We've given you what we think is the scope of the project. So the only reason, I think, why you would have a real discussion around this, other than this is the scope, right? Like sort of reiterating what's already been set forth in the project description. If you thought that there was something wrong with that, if you said, I have a real problem with this part of the scope. This looks like it would take 10 months to do. What do you think? And maybe you would be able to change that scope. But we think that it's already mostly been done. So you should assume that you know what the issue is and you know what the scope is. Don't invent and reinvent and allow scope creep. So one of the problems, I think, and one of the reasons why we've started this process earlier and earlier is that students tend to take a long time to believe that it's true, right? To believe that what they've been given is really what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And so we don't want you to do that. We want you to read it, believe it, make it your own, think about it, say, yep, I got it. These are the deliverables. This is the issue. This is the scope. As soon as you start going back to a client and asking things like, yeah, but what about this? What about this? What about that? Anybody who's been in consulting knows that if you ask, they will give you more work. They're not going to say, oh, don't do that. We don't need that. They're going to want more and more and more and more. So you have to be very, very careful not to let that happen. And I should say that if it starts to happen, you need to go to your faculty member and say, Houston, we have a problem because now the client has these expectations that I'm going to put together an an econometric model for something, and that was not what I was trying to say, and that's what they think they're going to get now. Right? So you have to have those expectations, well set. And if you are getting a lot of scope creep, as I said, go to your faculty member and get some help there. Have a specific quantitative target. I mentioned this before. So does anybody here, in any of the project descriptions you can think of when you looked at the deliverables and the like, have a quantitative target? I don't know your name. You. Yeah. Does yours? What are you working on? You're working on a project in China? Do you know which one? No? I'm not going to ask your name. Okay. Is it Choxy? Yeah.
I'm working on the insurance project in Dubai, where we're trying to introduce life insurance to Abu Dhabi or Dubai. I'm not sure.
So it's introducing a product. So it's product entry.
Yeah, they're trying to, I think from what I read was, they're trying to introduce it because life insurance has some aspects of it that Islamic finance or Islamic scholars wouldn't improve.
I see.
So they're trying to apply it or tweak it.
So that they can actually sell it.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so I don't know if any of you all heard that, but this is a life insurance project in Abu Dhabi. And one of the sort of interesting twists is Islamic law that doesn't allow a particular type of product, that particular type of financial product to be sold. So the question is there some way of positioning this that it's acceptable and that it can be sold and be profitable and so on? Okay, so the acceptable part, my guess is that you already know what you know what the challenges are, right? But what if I think what you would want to know also is, what if it is acceptable? What would make them want to do it, right? So the target that you would want to be looking for there is, yeah, you can do it, but you're going to lose a lot of money introducing this, right? You have to have a margin target, presumably, and you want to have some sort of bogey for just how much you'd have to sell. I mean, life insurance tends to be a scale kind of business, right? So what's the point at which they feel that it would be profitable for them? I would want to know that, right? I would want to know that right up front is, what's my target here? Just how much of this life insurance product has to be sold? Because that's probably part of it, right? It's probably half the problem is, maybe it can never be sold, but if it is, just how much of this do I have, what point do I have to get to in order for this to be successful? Okay, all of you should have that target by the time you're and talk with your faculty member about what really that target figure should be. But have it. It makes it a lot easier to say, okay, this is what I have to do, going forward. This is what I'm aiming for. This is what's going to make it a success. And as I said, your pro formas are a lot easier, obviously, if you can work backwards from that. Okay, make the project your own. This is something that I think you all are very reluctant to do, all right? And this is an instance where you really can do this. You definitely have our permission, right, to make the project your very own project and go with it. The whole clarification, I wonder if they want this, I wonder if I should be doing this, I wonder what this, just stop it. This is the project. This is what you think the answer might be. These are the analyses you have to do. Make it your own, right? It's your project, and then it becomes your project. If you just, if you get that energy around it and that decision making around it, you'll have a lot more confidence going forward. That's what we want. We don't want a lot of dithering. We don't want a lot of people wandering around going, I don't know what this project is about. figure it out. Figure it out and make it your own. It's, you know, and then it'll be a lot easier, obviously, you know, to go forward with some energy. Okay, but before you go, think, right? What's the project about? Have an opinion, have a view, have an idea of what the possible answers are. Okay, data. Data is always an issue. I think it's an issue everywhere in all the places where we are performing this work. So how do you get the data? Where's the data? You all always want more data. Everybody wants more data, right? Your clients definitely want more data, which is one of the reasons why at some point you have to stop asking them for data. But ask your clients for the data that they think you should have. That should be one of the first questions that you have for them. Is not, can you give me a breakdown of competitor shares in this particular market? The first question is, can you share with us whatever it is that you think that we should have? We're looking forward to seeing whatever it is that you think. And that is incredible. That's an incredible eye-opener. I mean, sometimes they're sharing stuff with you that you would never have thought of. You don't even know why they're giving it to you, right? And then you can ask why. You understand their perspective as to why this data is important and so on. So that's the first thing. Find out what it is that they think is important in the way of data. The second thing is never, ever send an email with a whole lot of unanchored questions. In fact, even if they're anchored, sending an email with 20 questions is terrible. It's a terrible idea. First of all, they don't want to answer it. Would you want to answer it? No. Right? They have full-time jobs. Getting something with 20 questions on it that are all of your angst is pouring out through these questions, right? No, they want to have maybe 4 questions, and they might want to know why you want it. It has to be anchored to something, right? We want to know how competitive your product is. Can you please tell us how many competitors, what you know about the competitors in the marketplace, or how many competitors are there? Who are your biggest competitors? I mean, something like that, right? So it's associated with a particular analysis, so that when that information comes in, you also know exactly where it goes. But they know what it's for. Otherwise, if it's just, like out there data, why would they do that? They don't want to do that. And what is important to us as Georgetown, for the faculty, for you guys, is that the client is engaged, right, understands what's being asked, and wants to participate. Always ask for specific data, right, for specific reasons. State the objective of the analysis. Even if it's not, even if you have to send an attachment that says, that says exactly what the analysis is. I'm doing a value chain analysis, right? Do you have any information on the abutting steps to this transportation piece, right? Calling is very effective. You guys don't like calling, but you should call. And there are some countries where it's very difficult. You'd have to be, up at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning to call. But emailing can be very slow. People can ignore emails, right? Don't be afraid to call people. Don't be afraid. Don't be cowards about this. Call associations. Call people at the Inter-American Development Bank. Look for people who have written articles. Call them. The worst that can happen is that they'll say they don't want to talk to you. And your client can't say that. So, they may be thinking that, but they can't say it. So, calling is important, and you'll get better at it. You get better at having that relationship, and call even unannounced. I mean, you don't have to have an email that says, I will call you at 0800 hours on Thursday, blah, 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 and have everybody in the room. I mean, just have one person call, to find out X. Okay, it's important. Again, I don't know if I mentioned that you don't have a lot of time. That you do that. Email is easy to ignore, and it can be slow. Then stop asking for data. Right? At some point, you keep saying, God, if I only had this data, I'd have the answer. Well, the client would also have the answer if they had the data, right? It's probably because there is no data. And I know in certain cultures, if you keep asking them for stuff, even like their own data, what you would love to know is have a breakdown of a particular, all of their products in a portfolio, what the profitability is, and we've often had Edelman as a client in Brazil, in China, all over the place, and this is what Edelman does not have. They have no data about their product performance anywhere in the entire company, and it doesn't matter how often you ask for it, they don't have it. And so that's actually why they've hired us, right? Is that they would like to know that, or they would like to know at least how to collect it. So at some point, and many cultures won't tell you that they don't have it because it's embarrassing. So if you don't get it, assume that it's not there, okay? At some point, you have to say, okay, we have to move on. I just may have to create my own database. Okay, so how do you create your own database? I'll ask for another project that might have, maybe there are going to be some data issues. You. What is your name?
Well, it's again sort of insurance.
I'm sorry?
It's again sort of insurance.
It's insurance. Okay. Tin, what do you have? Mm-hmm. What do they do, or what's the question?
They look into outsource a lot of their operations.
Ah.
You need to find the appropriate channels.
Okay, so how are you going to do that? The appropriate channels for outsourcing what? What exactly?
Well, it's my fifth project, so I don't.
Oh, you don't know. You were one of the four. I managed to find one of the 4 people who got their 5th project. Okay, all right. No, that's fair enough. But you can hypothesize with me. So they're trying to outsource, right? And they're trying to find the appropriate channels. I mean, there's probably not an industry report on channels for outsourcing X, right? There might be maybe in the United States, or there might be in Europe, right? So one way, if you can't get the data, one way is to use data by analogy, right? So you just find out, a similar industry. Or, so for example, let's say you're trying to find out about distribution channels within a country for, let's say, cosmetics. And there's very little on that, but there's a lot about food, okay? Granted, I know the difference between food and cosmetics, probably not the same. But let's say that's all you can get, right? Then you do whatever you can, right, to sort of use that data to construct data that might be appropriate for cosmetics. There could be, all sorts of rubrics for the number of department stores for the number of food stores in developing countries. Stuff like that, right? Where you're just trying to think through, given whatever data that you have. One of the things that I've said before to my corporate strategy students is, don't be afraid to do this, because sometimes if the data's not there, first of all, you can't be wrong, right? And secondly, it's really important work, right? You're creating something, it's new. And then, if it's wrong, at least you're putting something out there and saying, this is what we have. This is what we're going with. What do you think, right? And then your client, over the course of the year, can go, nope, this is definitely not right. But they know what to change, right? They say, no. And, as a matter of fact, we have 3 times as many department stores that have cosmetics counters, right? But that's an important piece of information that they can slip into your demand model or your sales model, right? So don't be afraid to do it. Your faculty member isn't going to know. Your faculty member is going to be impressed if you're able, whatever you're trying to do, to put together something that makes sense. I mean, your faculty member can say that doesn't make sense and can help you with that, but you've got to create the database, right? So just do it. If no one's giving you the data, then you've got to come up with something. Never blame the client when things aren't going well, right? Otherwise, you won't get paid. Oh, wait, we don't get paid. No, just don't, right? Because if they don't have it, whatever, if they have other things, they're distracted, their company's just been taken over, whatever, you can't blame them for the fact that your project isn't progressing. If they're not helping you, then you just need to do it yourself, right? You need to move forward. Don't ever stop moving. Don't ever stop working. It might seem wonderful that your client hasn't gotten back to you, because then you go, oh, thank God we have no data. Now we don't have to do anything for a week. That is completely wrong. And I'm guessing I see other faculty members up here. I know exactly how they will feel if you walk into a meeting and say, we just couldn't get anything done this week because there was no data from the client. Never stop working. Project meetings. Okay, this is coming mostly from me, but I'd like to believe that this is true for all faculty. These meetings are your meetings, right? These are meetings that you should assume that it really is like BCG. That this is a pull-up, this is a meeting where everything is being pulled up together. I'm the principal or the VP, and this is your dream job, and your entire career rests on this particular meeting. So coming in and sitting down and taking off your backpacks and sitting there and looking to the faculty member to direct the meeting is wrong, right? It's your meeting. You're supposed to impress us with the progress that you've made or the progress that you haven't made but what you're doing about it, right? It has to be in some sort of digestible form, right? So you're going to have to offer project material, let's read their deck, anything, right, that allows us to see what you're trying to tell us and allows us to respond to it. So all of us, all the faculty are a lot more helpful when we know what it is, where you are in the project, where the big wins have been, where the big ahas have been, where the really big challenges are, like the landmines that you found and what you're doing about it. Then we can be constructive and, oh, you know what you should do? You should think about this. Oh, remind me and I'll get you some cases that I know relate to this particular subject. Something like that. Or I know a couple of people that you can call who would help you with this. But we can't do that if we don't know what you're doing. And the only way to make that meeting really effective is to know. I mean, you all should know what it is that you want to get across so that you can be impressive and so that you can get the most out of what we know. Because I mean, for the most part, if it's not actually just going back and writing down a grade, I mean, we're assessing all of you after all those meetings. Like, we're assessing the meeting. It can be really discouraging and terrifying when a team is not, it has no energy and is not performing. Because it's our butts that are in the line, right? We've actually promised these clients something, and it's Georgetown, so we've done a school of business. So what I want to see, I'm always impressed with energy, even if it's, I mean, I can always be fooled a little bit by energy, even if it's not going anywhere. But some energy, some excitement, so this is what we're looking at. These are your meetings, okay? You get graded on these meetings. We look at you. We assess you on these meetings. Run the meeting with a high level of energy. I think I mentioned energy. Provide the agenda, but you have to have the assumption that it can get derailed. It's sort of like having an agenda when you go into a court. It could go differently. Impress us with your organization and thought leadership. And some faculty are going to want that deck at every meeting. And they'll let you know. Those faculty who are deck obsessed will let you know. But having that deck can be a unifying theme. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of the frequency of the meetings? Is there anything that's set? Are we meeting once a week, or is it just?
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, how often are these meetings? Other faculty, if I misspeak, you will let me know. I think we usually start out thinking that it's every week. So typically the rhythm of the class is it's a Tuesday, Thursday class. Tuesday, one of the days is going to be a class. So we'll have a speaker come in, or there will be mini presentations or current issues. So there are like 6 class meetings. The Thursday class, for example, might not be held. And then in lieu of that, you will either meet with your own teams or you'll meet with the faculty. So like once a week, I would say. However, you can always ask for special dispensation if you know that you don't have anything. I mean, and that's fair enough. Like at the very beginning, when you're just like trying to get your feet underneath you, meeting every 48 hours is like watching paint dry, right? I mean, there's no there. And I get that. And the worst thing in the world, of course, is to be asked, if you've all the consultants in the room, is there anything worse than having to constantly give a readout when what you would really rather be doing is working? So I think we all get that. So the meeting could be very short. You could say, we just want 20 minutes. We're just going to show you this. This is what we're working on. Next meeting, we'd like an hour and a half, something like that. And it's going to be different, right? It's going to be different by project team. So here's another tricky part to this. You've got 2 clients, and we're very sensitive to this, and we know how tricky this is. Because you want to do the very best for your client, and you want to really help them. You want to come up with the right answer, the best answer, the most supreme, superlative answer ever. We want to make them happy. But we're also your client, and ultimately you get a grade from us. I'm going to say that 99% of the time, what your client wants and what we want is exactly the same. If you feel that there's any divergence there, that what somebody is asking, like what your faculty member is directing you to do, that's not what your client wants, that somehow there's been a change in mission, or you think the faculty member has suddenly become deranged, or any of those, it happens, whatever, any of those things, then you have to say something. Say, you know what, I think we have a problem here, because I want to get the A, but I also don't want to show up with something that's going to be, be wrong or bad or, fall short for the client, which is a good point, because, our reputations depend on it. So just bring it up. I'm going to say, I've never had it be a problem, but I can see how it would be a problem, and you just need to bring that to the front. So if you feel requirements and deliverables are somehow diverging, talk to your professor. Typically, whatever your faculty member says is what you want to go with. Your presentations have to be very tight. We get this question all the time about heavy decks versus light decks. So let's say that you're coming up with a deck every week. Everybody's working to the deck. The deck is getting, it's like, 1.5 foot high by this point. You've got these unbelievable analyses and so on. This is not what you're going to show to the client. Right? The presentation is a light presentation. The presentation is a real consulting presentation, right? It's not hallucinogenic. It doesn't have, it's not kaleidoscopic. It doesn't have 1,000 pictures on it. It doesn't have 1,000,000 words on it. It has a point and some data. Point, data. Point. It's your story, right? You guys can't do this. Here's why, right? You all should do this. Here's how, okay? But you have to have that story. It's got to be really tight. The heavy deck or the other information, you can leave behind as much information as you like. And you have to write a paper. And the paper is as important as a presentation, mostly, or in many respects, because you are leaving. And so they've got to have the narrative, right, to everything you've just said. Am I running out of time, Val? What time is it? OK. So you're going to get a chance to leave that behind. The presentation itself, it needs to be sparse, skinny, beautiful, to the point, very direct, very powerful, not a lot of stuff, especially since a lot of your audiences are not English speaking. And so, if you use a lot of business aphorisms, this is a 30,000-foot view, we really hit this one out of the park, your audience is going to be, dazed and confused. So you have to be, be sensitive to that, be to the point. I mean, you want to impress with the solutions, right? With how beautiful and how elegant your solution is, and how great your analytics are. Presenting a logical narrative is very important. I made this point a lot in corporate strategy. You don't just want to have big blocks of work, like market analysis, industry structure, competitor analysis. No. Because who wants to see all the competitor analysis if there's no story there, right? You only want to show the competitor analysis that's furthering your point, right? The only thing you might want to say in competitor analysis is that, IBM is a monster, right? And you just go on about IBM, because that's the only story. You don't have to worry about anybody else. You can even say, you don't have to worry about anybody else. The only person you have to worry about is IBM, and just go on about IBM. But going through this painful analysis of competitors and showing that is not a good way to approach it. In your heavy deck, I'm willing to look at some painful stuff for a while. That's fine. Write your presentation early, okay? The logical narrative. This is your elevator story, okay? This is your, if I were, like in another month, right before you all leave for Christmas, what we should do is have every team stand up and say what the story is for what the story is for their presentation. You should know that. You should know that before you leave. In general, right? It's going to change, but in general, what is it that you're trying to say, or where is it that you're going? The slide deck will have a lot of empty slides, as you continuously fill in. Whatever doesn't make it into the presentation can be in the white paper, or it can be in an appendix. There are really only two ways to structure your storyline. Again, this is very McKinsey, okay? And I will reiterate that there are projects that don't fit this particular rubric. But McKinsey would say that your story, the way that your presentation should be organized, is either with a logical argument, which is A, therefore B, therefore C. So the present organization can't cope with all of these requirements. Let's say it's an organizational, sort of process kind of project. Each market served requires a distinct marketing emphasis. Therefore, the marketing organization should be structured, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, marketing should shift to an organization, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so let's say we're with bathing suits, right? You can definitely sell bathing suits into Miami. However, you need to go to an upscale market. If you go an upscale distribution channel, if you go to upscale, these are your options for upscale distribution, and these are your options for positioning within those particular distribution channels. Or you can go to logical grouping. 3 reasons why blank is the right answer. So I have 3 reasons for you why you're going to be successful selling bathing suits into Miami, right? Okay, one is that you have a differentiated product, you have the right distribution channel, you have the right price points. Those are my 3 arguments, okay? But those are logical narratives. That's the way you should be thinking. Think in terms of a story, not in terms of blocks of work. And none of you will do this, I know, initially, but that's what you should be thinking of as your story. Okay, start fast, start now. Okay, so here's one important point. I say start fast, start now. That's wrong. Don't start now. Don't do anything until you talk to your faculty member. Okay, don't contact your client. Definitely do not contact your client. Don't send anything to your client. Not a word, right? Until your faculty member gives you the green light. Because we'll all contact the client first and say, oh my God, you got the best team. I can't believe it. You got like the 6 smartest students in the MBA program. And let them know that their project is going forward. I have one project that's not going forward. We'll let them know that it's happening, and we'll tell them that they can expect to hear from you within the next 7 days. Then we'll let you know that you may do that, right? It's possible that your faculty member may want to meet with you before they let you loose on this client, right? That they want to talk, they want to give you all the background, tell you that this guy's a complete nut, but that this person is a person to talk to, not to be worried about this. Sometimes we have information, we have pamphlets, we know what we're doing. We have some information to share with you guys. But in general, you want to start early. You want to choose a team client contact, one person, okay? Because for obvious reasons, right? It's better for the client if they know that they are just going to call, Jen, no one else, or Lauren, and that's your contact person. Contact your client soon with your resumes after you get the faculty go ahead. Reiterate what the objective is from the project description. Make it your own. Make sure you understand what is off the table and what is of paramount importance. Those are the 2 things that I would go for. I would even ask them, say, tell me, is there anything here that you don't want to, like, is there an outcome here that is politically not possible for you? Like, you could say, you should definitely not do this. And that's the answer. And they're going to tell you, we can't say that. We're already committed to that. We just want you to tell us how to do this, okay? So you can, in your presentation, say, we really don't think you should do this. But if you have to do it, then this is how you do it, right? But you want to know that. You want to know that going in. And it's quite possible that when you run it by them, they'll have you take out some pieces of it and so on. So we want to be sensitive to what it is that they want. Getting the solid target, I mentioned. For share, margin, sales, whatever makes putting together your pro formas. Probably almost all of your presentations, your work should have a pro forma at the end. A go, no go, better process, growing market share. It's not just growing market share, you have to grow it profitably. So you're gonna have to do like a 5 or a 10-year pro forma, right? Okay, so that's more or less the process. You can tell that most of what I've shown you, both for McKinsey and BCG, and also a little bit of hybrid work of our own, a lot of it is predicated on what consulting firms really do, and also it's predicated on what we know about how all of this happens. The work is uneven, we get that in terms of timing, but more importantly, you have to really be charging. You've got to make it your own. You have to go forward. You can't stop working, right? And you have to have an idea of what the outcome, you have to know what success is, and you have to be able to put together the analyses, to get to that point for your client. We probably have about 5 minutes, 10 minutes? 5 minutes. Okay, so any questions about your specific project or about how this proceeds, about contacting clients? I think that the MSB Tech Center can be very helpful in this regard in terms of setting up video conferencing and the calls. You have a budget. Every team has a budget that is not for the tombs. It's for making calls or sending stuff or buying some studies and whatnot. What else? Anything? Yes.
I know they give us options for Rosetta Stone, and kind of if we're not familiar with the language of the country that we're going to.
Yeah.
Is it, like, how important is it to kind of understand the language, or should we just kind of assume that everyone we're speaking with has a good grasp of?
Right. Yeah, I think that the Rosetta Stone stuff, the language stuff, was really meant to be more for your own comfort level. I mean, English is going to be the lingua franca. Everyone, I mean, that's what the exchanges are all going to be. I think it probably has more to do with being in country rather than sort of client relations, just sort of being able to feel comfortable and getting around. But it was one of the reasons why they thought to offer this was that we had a lot of requests from students over the years. You know, what they really wanted was faculty to sort of introduce them to the language, which is, you know, not what we do, and, you know, takes up some time. But, you know, so we thought this was a good resource just to offer. The non-disclosure agreements, by the way, as Valeria said, are posted, and a lot of clients like those, even though I think that there's no way that we could be sued or that you could sue them or whatever, but I think there's a level of comfort knowing that we're sort of agreeing not to show this information to others. Okay, any other questions about sort of procedures, conceptualizing? Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Thank you.